I've already told him that, but he didn't listen to me. Maybe he's your staff. He'll listen.
I call this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board to order. May I please have a motion to certify closed session?
Madam Chair, I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discuss only public matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Zombie. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Young. Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Surza, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Taylor.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers. Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Ownby.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye. Thank you. We've certified closed session. Now, Ms. Surza, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Beers.
Here.
Ms. Hummel.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Ownby.
Here.
Mrs. Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Young.
Here.
Ms. Cook.
Here. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Young. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly and Ms. Ownby. Any discussion? Hearing no, it's been moved, none. It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Surza, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Ownby.
Aye.
Mrs. Taylor.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye. Okay, we have an agenda.
That brings us to announcements and superintendent's report. Dr. Herron?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. It's my pleasure to announce that Dr. Beers was elected as the 2018-19 Chair of the Hampton Roads Education and Telecommunications Association Educational Advisory Committee at their annual meeting on May 23rd. Dr. Beers will begin his one-year term on July 1st. Congratulations, Dr. Beers. Jamestown High School's Envirathon team, coached by Rebecca Elton, Amanda Mullane, and Charlie Dubai, beat out 12 of the top teams in Virginia to claim the title of state champions. The team will now prepare to represent Virginia at the international competition in Idaho this July. Congratulations to the Jamestown Envirathon team. Link 5 students are wrapping up the year preparing to use their leadership skills to create positive change in the Lafayette High School community through the Leader in Me project. Students discussed ways in which their leadership skills could improve the culture and community of Lafayette and examined primary and secondary sources to develop a plan for change. Students will incorporate mixed media internal portraits to create a composition that reflects how their leadership skills can influence the change they want for Lafayette, and they will write an essay to explain the significance of 3 of the symbols in their art. J.B. Blayton elementary student Michaela Lamb will attend the Epilepsy Foundation of Virginia's Use a Helmet Prevent Epilepsy Awards ceremony in Richmond on May 31st, where she will be recognized for winning first place in the Use a Helmet Prevent Epilepsy poster contest. Miss Lamb will be accompanied by her 4th grade teacher, Miss Witt, and her family, and will get a guided tour of the state capitol after the ceremony. On May 17th, we saluted 89 employees who are either retiring or celebrating landmark service years. To those employees we honoured that evening, I thank you once more for your service to our school division. To our retirees, please know that you will be missed, and we wish you well. Those are all of the announcements for this evening, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Hearing none, that brings us to 5.01 board recognitions. Dr. Herron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing us to hold recognitions tonight so we can celebrate the accomplishments of several students before we go on summer break. We begin with 2 members of the Lafayette High School's forensics team who were named VHSL 4A state champions for dramatic duo. These ladies won first place in their category for this title. Would Hannah Cantrell and Christine Strong join us up front to be recognized? Congratulations again. Oh, one more photograph. Three Jamestown students placed first in their category at the Future Business Leaders of America State Leadership Conference. The conference featured competitive events for students throughout the Commonwealth, and because of their accomplishment, these talented young ladies were invited to participate at national FBLA competitions in Baltimore from June through July 1st, 2018. Unfortunately, tonight's meeting conflicts with Jamestown Seniors Awards night, so many of these students could not be with us this evening. However, we will call each student's name in recognition of their accomplishment. If you are in attendance this evening, please join us up front when your name is called. Faith Johnson, first place in advertising. Jackie Morris, first place, global business. Alexander Mucher, first place, global business. Congratulations, we wish you well in the national competition. Schools provide high school juniors and seniors with intensive educational experiences. Students live on a college or university campus for up to 4 weeks in the summer, and during this time they are involved in classroom and laboratory work, field studies, research, individual and group projects and performances, and seminars with noted scholars and visiting artists. Students, as your name is called, please come forward to be recognized and remain up front for a group photograph. From Jamestown, Justin Ekstrom, Visual Performing Arts Academy. Madeline Geyer, Latin Academy. Faith Jaragay, Spanish Academy. Jessica Shee, Math, Science and Technology Academy. From Lafayette High School, Marie Anderson, French Academy. Lucy Lee, Spanish Academy. Erin Shivers, Humanities Academy. Samantha Soul, Visual Performing Arts Academy. Christine Strong, Visual Performing Arts Academy. Great job, students. We know you'll have a great experience this summer. We are pleased to recognize 10 seniors who have earned earned the Williamsburg James City County Public Schools Honours Seal. Students graduating with this distinction take a demanding curriculum which includes a minimum of 5 advanced placement courses in 3 different content areas and a 4-course sequence in 1 global language. The students also designed and completed a community service project and a research-based honours project. Again, because of scheduling conflicts, not all of the students are here this evening. However, we're going to acknowledge each student and read out their name for completing these rigorous tasks. From Jamestown High School, John Agnew, Sarah Barry, Belle Long, Marie Helena Peters, Katerina Savelnova, Jeffrey Shee, Angelique Vaux, Samantha Zhang. From Lafayette High School, Eleanor Glee. And with us this evening from Warhill High School is Erin Tweed. Congratulations again, all of the students. Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes the evening's recognitions. Thank you.
That brings us to citizens' comments. I believe we have 2 speaker cards this evening. Ms. Hummel?
I'll give them time.
Well,
Yeah.
let's give them time to exit. But- Oh. Okay, I'm gonna, okay.
Shoot it over.
All right, this is the time when citizens who have submitted speaker cards are invited to address the board. Speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their name for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes. Time cannot be yielded to another speaker. Personnel matters are not discussed in open school board meetings, and we ask that you refrain from making references to specific individuals. The board is interested in hearing all comments fully and requests that citizens refrain from verbal outbursts, applause, or any other type of demonstration. Although the board does not respond to comments at this time, please know that we are listening and we appreciate your time. Thank you for adhering to these guidelines. Madam Chair, my directions are concluded.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Zomby?
Barbara Henry.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Barbara Henry, 141 Devon Road. I came this evening to make a request to the board to put your checkbook online, as James City County recently has done. It is a very simple matter requiring at most an inexpensive piece of software, and at best, the system already in use has the capacity to automatically post the school board's monthly expenditures. A phone call to the county administrator would clarify the procedure. We as citizens deserve to see in line item form exactly where our taxpayer dollars are going. There can't be any disputing that an online checkbook register is the right thing to do. And in this age of technology, there is absolutely no reason why this board's checkbook register cannot be posted online. as James City County has done. Again, I request the school board's monthly expenditures to be posted online. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henry.
Greg Caldwell.
My name is Greg Caldwell. I am the parent of an 8th grade student at Toano Middle School. Thank you for the speaking time this evening. I'm here to address my concerns for school safety and to offer topics for your consideration. I offer 2 premises. First, that school shootings are a clear and enduring danger in our society. Second, that our geographic area is not exempt from the risk of deadly school shootings, as evidenced by the 52 arrests for threats of school shootings in Hampton Roads between the Parkland shooting on February 14 and March 13. My child was on the receiving end of one of those threats. What I want is for our students, teachers, staff, and security personnel to be as safe in their schools as our county and city employees are in the courthouse. To accomplish this, I propose you consider the following. Number 1, metal detectors to be used at the entrances to all schools. Number 2, bag checks to be conducted at all entry points to all schools. Number 3, a minimum of 2 armed SRO or SSO personnel in all schools. This is exactly the protection the county and city provide the employees at the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse. The risk landscape in our school system is changing, and our school security measures need to keep up. This so-called courthouse blueprint incorporates security measures already in place and successfully tested by the city and the county. The setup would need to be tailored and expanded, and there are ways to reduce costs and speed the process to accommodate the larger volume of people. There are 4 potential objections to these measures that, when considered, should be unacceptable. The first potential objection is cost. To object on the basis of cost puts a dollar value on the life of my child that is different from the dollar value of the lives of our city and county employees at the courthouse. The second potential objection, quote, "It hasn't happened here," unquote. Well, once it happens, it's too late. The third objection, courthouses are more at risk than schools. I find no evidence to support this. Actually, the evidence seems to suggest that schools are at more risk than courthouses. And the fourth potential objection would be that most other schools aren't doing this, which to my research is probably true.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your consideration of the above and your leadership in making our school system the premier school division in our state. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 7.01, Child Development Resources Lease Renewal at Lafayette High School. Dr. Herron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Child Development Resources lease is up for renewal on an annual basis, and Mr. Snipes is here to answer any questions that you have and to present this item this evening.
Good evening, School Board Chair, School Board members, Dr. Herron. As Dr. Herron said, in 2010, the 900 building at CDR was renovated to accommodate the early Head Start program. Each year, we bring this forward for you to renew the CDR lease. We are required by our MOU to provide them at least 90 days written notice that we are leasing or that they would like to renew their lease, and they have provided that 90 days written notice that they would like to renew.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Young?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Snipes. I just have a question. It's one of the things that said in the contract that the purpose of the program shall be to provide a laboratory experience in child development for high school students enrolled in courses within the family and consumer science. Do we have any numbers of how many students have registered for next year in these classes yet at Lafayette? 'Cause, I mean, I know they were just finishing up the enrollment.
I don't think we have the numbers of enrollment yet, but we should have them very soon, and we can certainly provide those for you.
Thank you.
And like historically, what has been the enrollment from, that would be useful too.
And actually, how many students actually participate in observing and participating in the CDR? So,
How much, maybe this is in here, how much is the lease? Like, how much does it cost?
I would have to, I don't know that right off the top.
Should be.
Is it, I thought it was like $1. Is it free?
yeah, I think it's free.
So
from
it's free?
Ed.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure that that's on the record too, that there's no cost for, what's the square footage of lease space?
That's
Auto
not
lab.
something that I have right off the
Is
top of
that
my head.
building
I'd have to get
900?
the
It's the
900
half of building 900,
It's more like a third.
third of
Yeah.
building 900?
So more like a
Okay.
third of building 900.
And could you give me an update on the playground situation with regard to the auxiliary gym?
What would you like to know?
So when the auxiliary gym was built, the playground had to be moved? Is that correct?
The playground didn't have to be moved. We had to remove certain pieces from the playground in order to create the canopy that goes from the main building to the auxiliary gym. Those pieces of equipment will be put back in place as soon as we are finished with construction.
And then how is that space going to be used as far as transporting the kids between the CDR Building 900 and the playground that's on the other side of the auxiliary gym?
Said, how is it going to be used?
Yeah, I mean, how are they actually going to be transporting the kids? Are they going to be going through Lafayette High School?
I would have to ask Ms. Thomas, who's in charge of CDR, how they currently take the students over to the school. That's not something that I would know. We'd have to ask Lisa Thomas, who's in CDR.
To Julie's point, before the auxiliary gym, they could just open up their door and the CDR students could access the playground. But now with the auxiliary gym,
CDR, the playground is still in the same location it has always been. We just moved a piece of equipment out of there and placed it back. The playground, there are two playgrounds. I think you're looking at the playground that is directly kind of in front of CDR.
that's not
No,
the one, we're
that's
talking
Okay,
about
we're
the one
talking
that's in the
about-
back.
The one near the current gymnasium has always been there. So they've always had to exit out of their building and either come through Lafayette or go around the back of the backside of the school near the gym to access the playground. They've only had two options.
We can certainly confirm the access points and how they get there as part of our responses to you.
Mr. Kelly?
Sure. So back in 2010, when it was the former automotive shop space and we weren't using it, CDR brought money, renovated the space, and now that's why we rent it to them for $1. Has there been any discussions about how CDR transitions out of Lafayette now that we are at capacity and busting at the seams? Has there been any discussions with CDR about a possible transition plan to a different location so that we can use that for our students?
I know in our previous conversations, each year when you renew it, you asked last year, we discussed with CDR what would be their transition times. Ms. Thomas did provide an email that said they would need at least 4 to 6 months for them to move on from CDR. But there have not been any ongoing discussions about them leaving at the current time.
Because CDR is an important part of this community and has been as a staple of this community, and we want to fully support CDR. but we also have needs now for our students, and so we need to, you know, I don't want to be, you know, brutal here, but I mean, we've got to start looking at how we could utilize that space for our students and in the long term, now that all of our schools are at or near capacity. So just a conversation we should have with CDR.
I believe, Mr. Kelly, if we end up with putting extensions in our capital improvement plan this fall, and then it's eventually voted on and approved potentially next May, then we would go into design phase to make those alterations, and that would take a period of time. So there's potentially another year before to allow them opportunity to find somewhere and be given lots of notice to.
Yes, instead
to
of
move
building
on.
additional space where that space could be utilized, you know, it's just for a cost savings for the taxpayer. We should probably consider that when we do our design.
Mr. Snipes, two things are on my mind as I think about taking action on this lease renewal at the next meeting. The first has to do exactly with what Mr. Kelly was talking about, what that timeline is. Right now, Dr. Herron and you and your teams are working to figure out with the localities what our short and long-term planning needs are for educational space. That could include recapturing all of the educational space in Building 19 and Building 900 for students at Lafayette. And if hypothetically, in the next CIP, funds were allocated to support renovating Building 900. I guess what I'm curious about, if I could get the information before we take action, what is the soonest, if, given our systems of the CIP process and approval with the localities, hypothetically, what's the soonest we would need to take possession of that space for renovation purposes?
Design will usually take 6 to 8 months. And so you're looking at about, if approved in FY '20, then that means money will be available in, FY '19, money will be available on July 19, which means we would be able to take possession of the space somewhere for construction around June of '20.
June of '20. If we could get that in just on a
Yes.
timeline, I'd appreciate it. The other thing I read in the lease that I thought was interesting, and given the talk about security in schools right now, I am generally concerned about our employees being responsible for children that are not under our jurisdiction. And so in this case, if something were to happen at a school, any one of our schools where there are children embedded in our schools that aren't ours, that's a concern to me, because those employees aren't ours. And therefore, I know that there's an incredible working relationship. I get that. But when I think about our employees being responsible for children that aren't in our jurisdiction, when it comes to emergency management of any kind, that's a concern of mine in today's society. So that's something that is, written into the lease agreement, that we can be in charge of that and evacuate and so forth. But I just think moving forward, the more we can manage our risk and being responsible for people who are in our buildings. We have contracts with people who are providing therapy services, but there's a contract that outlines that relationship. But also then we have relationships with organizations who have our space, and the employees aren't ours and the children aren't under our jurisdiction. So that, in terms of safety and security, is a concern of mine. And I don't know, Dr. Herron.
Madam Chair, would you like us to go back and review the lease through that lens and maybe update it appropriately, take it through legal services, and see what's most appropriate
Yeah,
because of the changing circumstances from several years ago?
right. Yeah, I guess I would appreciate that kind of risk management perspective. I mean, to echo what Mr. Kelly said, CDR is a critical, important of our educational infrastructure in this community. Their services are second to none. They have an international reputation. They're an amazing partner. Their quality is exceptional. What they do for kids in our community is truly remarkable, and I value that organization a lot. But here I'm wearing my board hat, and I have to put our organization first. So,
Yeah, the only thing, maybe a lease might not be the appropriate place for that as opposed to an MOA or a memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding to how those issues get resolved. The lease might not be the appropriate instrument for that.
Oh, it might also be helpful to know how CDR provides security in their other facilities as well.
What is being done currently at Building 900 to provide security for those students.
And then, once again, touching on the budget piece, because we are watching our money very tightly. If there's, it's basically a free lease, are we providing cleaning services? Are we providing security? Are we, what is WJCC providing that that there's a dollar amount associated with that perhaps there should be some compensation for that?
We do provide janitorial services by the lease agreement where our custodians clean those spaces and provide paper towels and.
Is that free?
Yes, if you would consider they're not paying for it, yes, they are not paying for it.
Pay for it, it's not
We
free.
pay, the
They-
taxpayers pay.
And CDR, I think,
Okay.
put in almost $500,000 to renovate that space, and by the lease agreement, that's why that space was considered.
Well, and I think it'd be good for this board to understand what that in-kind does with regard to the relationship with CDR to draw down those federal funds. It's part of that funding formula, and our resources help to make that happen. And so I think that's important for us to know. It's not simply coming out of our pocketbook. There's a benefit that we receive in kind in turn for that. So I think it would be important to understand that.
Yeah, we will certainly, there's a lot of great questions. We'll pull together a response for the board and also go back and look at the terms of the lease and then bring it back to you. It may not be at the next meeting, it may be at the July meeting, to allow us the time to get all the information and review the lease appropriately with regard to security especially.
And the movement of the children from CDR to that second playground.
Thank you.
Anything else on that? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Snipes. We appreciate that. That brings us to item 7.02, VHSL membership. Dr. Herron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Annually, we bring forward to the authorization of VHSL memberships for Jamestown, Lafayette, and War Hill High Schools, and Mr. Ottstott is here to present this agenda item this evening, I believe. Good evening.
Evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Herron, members of the school board. I'm Adam Ottstott. I serve as a coordinator for health and physical education, and tonight I'm here on behalf of the WJCC Athletic Department to request school board authorization for Virginia High School League memberships for Jamestown, Lafayette, and War Hill High Schools for the 2018-2019 school year. Studies show that high school student athletes perform better academically than their peers, are less likely to participate in unhealthy or risky behaviors, and manage time more effectively and efficiently. Participation leads to leadership skills, positive social connections, and goal setting. VHSL athletics and activities not only foster a strong sense of school spirit, but often create a strong sense of school community pride as well. Each year, each member school has to renew their membership. The membership fee is based on three things. One, number of sponsored activities at each school. Number two, a basic membership fee. And three, the league insurance premium. There's a $35 fee for each sponsored activity for a school from the previous year. We have marginal differences in our schools based on differences in student interest in our different school populations and that school's ability to field a full team or activity from the past year. The basic membership fee is the same for all schools. It's a flat rate of $800 per school. And the insurance assessment to members for the 2018-2019 school year is $5.50 per student and is calculated by the number of students who participated in a sponsored activity in the 2017-2018 school year. These proceeds are used to pay the premiums on the insurance policies that the VHSL must maintain in order to conduct its programs and activities. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ottstott. Any questions from Mr. Ottstott? All right.
Thank you.
You're off the hook.
All right.
All right. That brings us to item 7.03, Federal Program Grants 2018-2019. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Annually, we bring forward for your consideration the grants applications for Titles 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Mr. Thorpe is here to begin the presentation and introduce the other presenters this evening. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Herron, members of the board. The purpose of this agenda item tonight is to present the proposed applications for the federal programs Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV for the 2018-2019 school year. Because there were needed edits on the grants, we have provided you with a list of the revisions that were made, and these are at your workstation. As a reminder, thank you. As a reminder of the purposes of each grant, Title I serves to provide personnel and resources that support supplement academic programming in qualifying schools. Title II supports training, preparation, and recruitment of highly qualified teachers and leaders. Title III supports language instruction for students with limited English proficiency. And Title IV, which is also known as the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant, provides funds for programs and activities to improve students' academic achievement. Dr. Laura Estes, who is our coordinator for Title I, will share information about WJCC's allocation history with federal grants and highlights from the 2018-2019 Title I grant application.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Herron. I will start with sharing a little bit about allocation history with you. As you can see, over the past 3 years, Title I grant funds have remained fairly stable with relative increases across Title II and Title III. Title IV is a new grant which will be addressed further into the presentation. It is helpful to remember state funding is formula-based and includes factors such as enrollment and free and reduced lunch. And that we also write the grant with what is called level funding using the previous year's allocation until the state releases the updated allocations in the fall. For Title I, state funding formulas drive the amount that schools receive and that are at or above the division's average for free and reduced lunch, which is currently 34%. And any student, in fact, that is in need of academic services is eligible. So consistent with statewide education reform efforts, our Title I goals focus on implementing education reform and school improvement for programs that are founded in research-based methods in conjunction with innovative and educational improvement to meet the needs of all our students. Thus, we strive to develop and implement education programs to improve not only student achievement, but also teacher performance. The budget breakdown reflects our priority for direct services to students, with percentages funneled toward professional development, instructional materials, and home and parent resources that are a smaller, similar percentage. We have 7 Title I schools, as you can see here on the slide, that we serve currently. And as the budget showed on the previous slide, we focus on direct services to students through the use of highly trained teachers with supplemental services. Because of the promising results of students served, we continue with the implementation of leveled literacy intervention, reading recovery, and successful start programs. But in order to maximize the impact of this programming and other services being provided in Title I schools, our Title I grant includes ongoing professional development for our service providers. Additionally, we emphasize involving parents and providing resources for parents to utilize at home in order to broaden the service of students needing support. For information related to the 2018-19 Title II grant, Dr. Terry Rotinger, our coordinator for Title II, will share information about that part of the application.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. Title II funds support training. Thank you. Title II funds support training, preparation, and recruitment of highly qualified teachers and leaders. Title II supports the implementation and support of schools using collaborative teacher teams, which was previously called data teams. Collaborative teacher teams incorporates the following: a cycle that includes selecting a standard and setting a goal, identifying an instructional strategy, grade level or department teams that examine individual student work generated from common assessments, collaborative structured scheduled meetings that focus on the effectiveness of teaching and learning. And along with evaluating student performance, final outcomes in the cycle prompt teachers to evaluate their teaching and the strategy that served as the focus for the team planning. Additionally, Title II funds address a portion of salaries for our elementary literacy coordinator at 0.65, secondary math coordinator at 0.5, and the science coordinator at 0.25. To share information related to our division's Title III and IV applications, here is Dr. Pat Tillman, coordinator of ESL and World Languages.
Thank you, Dr. Rotinger. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Dr. Herron, and school board members. It is our proposed plan to continue to utilize the Title III funds in a manner consistent with division initiatives and in alignment with the 4 pillars of our program to serve English learners: building programmatic capacity, building instructional capacity, building linguistic and academic capacity, and building family and community engagement capacity. Our Elevation platform is an integrated information and instructional learning management system specifically designed to meet the needs of educators serving ELs. Not only does the platform house all of our demographic, assessment, and programmatic information for our English learners, but it also provides classroom teachers with content-specific, language-focused resources that can be used in the general education classroom to support EL learning, in addition to providing an online collaborative space for language instructors, content teachers, specialists, and administrators to support the success of our English learners. The Imagine Learning platform is a computer-based suite of individualized, adaptive instructional experiences designed to enrich the language acquisition of our English learners that also includes extensive offline intervention tools and materials to facilitate teacher-led, highly targeted small group instruction that directly supports the computer-based learning. The Newcomers Academy and Verified Credit Pathway programs will continue to emphasize the conceptual and fundamental language of literacy and numeracy. Students will engage in highly scaffolded, language-rich activities that encourage language expression across the 4 domains. We also intend to utilize funds to support our language instruction summer enrichment program, as well as our English Learner Parent Resource Center. Moving on to Title IV. In October of this year, we were informed of the opportunity to receive Title IV funds. These funds are generally used for increasing technology and enhancing instruction for students through professional development opportunities for educators. We applied to receive these funds and were awarded the Title IV allocation. Our team opted to transfer the funds to Title III to increase technology and enhance instruction specifically for our growing population of English learners. We anticipate receiving the Title IV funds for the coming year and plan to continue to use the allocation to support the expansion of our digital instructional resources and professional learning opportunities. Thank you for allowing me to share, and Mr. Thorpe is going to come and provide some additional information.
Thank you, Dr. Tillman. The outcomes of all about which we've heard are vitally important to us. We're in the middle of our data collection cycle now, and that's going to continue through midsummer. As we did in the 2016-2017 school year, we're planning to highlight services and programming for English learners as well as with early literacy during next year's Equity Through Engagement series. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Drs. Estes, Rotinger, and Tillman for their work with the applications and in preparing for tonight's presentation. At this time, we would be delighted to answer any questions that you might have.
Ms. Hummel?
So our free and reduced lunch numbers are going up, right? Historically, they've been kind of going up?
Percentage-wise?
No, I was asking you if you wanted to speak after her.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I just am curious as to why our Title I grants seem to be they seem to be going down from the 2015-16 levels, and I was just wondering, what's the reason for that?
Sure. I may defer to Dr. Estes here in just a minute, but I'll lead by saying one of the factors that we didn't mention that impacts our allocations is what the federal government gives to the Commonwealth of Virginia. If what they give to the Commonwealth is less, then often school divisions get less. Dr. Estes, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
You can stay right here. The only thing that I would like to add is that with the transition to ESSA from NCLB, the state put basically all districts in a holding pattern and took state set-aside funds from every division across the state this year. And so that was why we saw a difference in our funding. Normally, they only take from certain divisions to support the needs across the state for schools and school improvement. So we all felt a little change in allocation.
Dr. Estes, before you leave the microphone, you threw out some acronyms that maybe the general public may not know, so can you just, yeah.
Sure. So previously we were operating under the No Child Left Behind Law Act, and we have transitioned into the, help me out, Every Child Succeeds Act. Thank you. Yes.
Student succeeds.
Well, that does make sense with that. So yeah, so Every Student Succeeds Act.
Excellent.
It's a test.
Thank you.
And just as a follow-up to that, so we've got this $1,307,000 amount of money, and it doesn't matter whether we had 9 schools or 11 schools that are Title I.
That
We
is-
still have that bucket to work with?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And will the funds, if there's a higher percentage of free and reduced lunch kids in one school, will that school receive proportionally more of those funds than another school that has a lower percentage?
If they are a school that is receiving Title I funds, yes.
It's not a blanket, every school gets X.
No, sir.
Okay, just want to make sure.
And then just one other, so for the kids that are in the, let's say Stonehouse and Matoka that are those the only 2 non-Title I schools?
Matoka and Stonehouse do not receive Title I services.
But
They are the
for-
only elementary schools who do not receive
But
Title
for
I
the
services.
kids that fall below the poverty threshold in those 2 schools, do they not have access to reading recovery and some of those benefits that the kids have in the other schools?
Again, I'm going to pitch the first end of this doubleheader by responding and saying, yes, we actually have a reading recovery teacher at Matoka Elementary and Stonehouse Elementary schools. And the schools that are receiving Title I services actually have one locally funded reading recovery teacher and then one that's also paid for through the grant. Dr. Estes, is there anything more that you would like to add to that? Okay.
And so the grant funds are to supplement, they have to be over and above the other schools in services.
Thank you for the presentation. It's and the breakdown of the different Title I through IV. It's very clear and provides a lot of clarity to that. And that's not usually what we have gotten in the past. So I appreciate that. The other thing too is, these are Title I monies, and it's, 1.3 million, but you have to account, it doesn't just go into the bucket and thank you very much. You have to account for how you spend that 1.3, and all those records have to be kept, and, it doesn't come without strings and attachments.
Yes, sir.
Zombie?
Question probably for Dr. Rodinger with the Title II. I was just wondering if you could expand on the hiring and retention of staff, what that looks like? Or Mr.
Certainly,
Stewart?
I'd be happy to speak to that. You'll notice in the grant that we've allocated $1,000 for that, and I feel like a great example would be if we had a need in an area such as mathematics, and we were again without a teacher with that certification, but we also had a teacher who wanted to teach mathematics. We could use those funds to pay for his or her praxis or other needed tests in order to get that certification. We could use those funds in order to pay for that. Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? Mr. Thorpe, Drs. Estes, Rodinger, and Tillman, thank you very much. Dr. Heron, I have and Ms. Serz, I have a process question. It's a process question, you're good. So this is, in the next agenda, this is all bundled together as one action item, or is it separated into 4?
It'll be all one action item
Okay.
as a consolidated grant.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to 7.04, WJCC Schools Foundation Donation for Innovative Learning Grants. Dr. Heron, Ms. Hummel.
So, and another grant award coming up, and we have been informed by the WJCC Schools Foundation that their second grant award is going to be in the amount of $18,813.82. And just these grants will be delivered to the teachers in early June. I think the foundation is trying to work with the school system in trying to figure out the best way to notify the teachers of these grants, since we're not going to have the bus ride thing since school's out. But do you want to add anything?
I believe the announcement of grants will come very soon, this Friday. And teachers will learn soon if they are a recipient of a foundation grant. As you all are aware, the foundation grants have been exceptional. They've helped teachers do many innovative things in the classroom. So this is an exciting time for teachers who've applied for a grant to see if they've been successful or not. And we're incredibly grateful to the WJCC Schools Foundation for a second round of grants and all of the resources they're providing to our teachers.
And the second round was actually a direct result of soliciting feedback from the teachers at WJCC about the grant cycle, and they heard that it would be very useful to have another grant cycle. So this is the first time they've tried it, and I want to really, it requires a lot of volunteer effort on the part of the WJCC School Foundation to actually go through 2 cycles and review the grants and award the grants. So I just wanted to thank all of the members of the WJCC Schools Foundation, the people who donate to the foundation, as well as the countless volunteers that put their time into making it work. So, sorry.
Dr. Beers?
Okay. I just had a couple of questions. One of them was, when were teachers notified that there would be a second round of grants?
I believe it was about 6 months ago, possibly.
So that, there was they had decided way back then that they were going to do a second, okay, so they were notified and they had plenty of time. Okay.
Yep.
That was it?
Yep.
That's it.
Mr. Kelly?
Actually, I think they were notified at the beginning of the year that there was going to be 2 awards this year.
Convocation.
Yeah, I think so, a convocation. Process, so they'll be announced on Friday and we'll vote on it on the 19th?
So
Okay.
So when do we approve the funds? So how do we,
I think we're voting to receive the funds.
okay, do we do that on the 19th, or do we do that?
Generally, it happens, we bring it one meeting, then we approve
We
the
approve it
next
the next,
meeting,
okay.
but if we wait until the 19th, the teachers won't be there. So
Is
we
there
do
any
have a
way
pro-
we can adjust anything so that we could actually accept the funds? Is that, I don't know, process-wise, is that?
If the board is amenable to it, we could add a action item 10.02 to accept the funds this evening. That would be, we've already approved the agenda, so that would be highly unusual, but if everybody is willing to suspend the rules, as it were, Ms. Parliamentarian, for that piece of,
I mean, it's to
Okay.
receive funds for our teachers so
Okay.
that they find out about it before they, is that
I'll make-
correct?
I'll make a motion
okay.
that we suspend the rules. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, okay, so there's been a motion to suspend the rules to allow for 10.02 as an action item. Is there a second to Dr. Beers's?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay. Ms. Surza, are we in compliance with Robert's rules? As
Probably
part?
not.
know.
All right, then. All right, then will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Ownby.
Aye.
Mrs. Taylor.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly. Ms. Cook.
Aye, okay, so we will add item 10.02, and Ms. Hummel will make the motion, because you can figure out how to word that, but, so you work on that between now and then, all right? Okay.
Didn't mean to cause a stir there.
Yeah, no, that was a
thank
good
you.
catch, thank you.
Thank you,
Because at the
Mr. Kelly.
time that this agenda was put together, I'm not sure that that piece of information was available to us. So, is there anything else on 7.04? No, okay. Well, I'd just like to echo, I'd like to thank Ms. Hummel and Dr. Herron for serving on the board, and thank the board for their continued partnership as the organization continues to evolve and grow, and we're delighted to partner with them, and appreciate their support. Item 7.05, approve the 2018-2019 Code of Conduct. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is an annual event where we bring forward any changes in the Code of Conduct, and Ms. Bourgeois works with the committee to bring about these changes every year and is here to provide some information of proposed changes for this year. Thank you, Ms. Bourgeois.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Herron. Thank you for this opportunity to review the proposed changes to the 2018-19 Code of Conduct. This is brought before you each year annually for review and approval. It was last approved on May 16th, 2017. The policy revisions found in the Code of Conduct have been also reviewed by the attorney. WJCC does utilize a committee approach to revising the Code of Conduct. It's comprised of parents and school staff, and the committee met 4 times during second semester. I will be taking you through some changes if you'd like to follow along using the agenda item document. I'm going to take you page by page, quite honestly. So first of all, you'll see it's a different color. It's blue next year, not purple. Very exciting. We've changed everything to 2018-19, wherever the date is. The welcome letter and table of contents have been updated. In order to make the table of contents accurate, you will notice as we go through the handbook that the red lines you normally see in policy changes are not indicated. These will be captured in the policy revisions that will be presented to you later this evening for any changes that have occurred regarding policy. On page 7, we didn't make any changes to the bus information. We did that just last year, if you recall. Starting on page 7, you're going to see a brand new page, and it's regarding bullying. The committee really spent a lot of time talking about the bullying reports we get and working with students and families about how to identify when something is or isn't bullying. So they felt pretty strongly that we wanted to try to provide some additional information beyond our bullying and cyberbullying rule. So on page 7, you see the result of the efforts of the committee. And it really tries to achieve 3 goals. One is to provide clarification on the definition of bullying, to provide examples of behaviors that may or may not be seen as bullying, and by the way it's formatted, hopefully to provide a talking tool for parents and families. They really spent a lot of time on this. We've also provided some additional resources and provided information about the notification process for parents. On page 8, the adjustments that you see have to do with a change in state law. Governor Northam, I think, signed it on Friday. But this is based on Senate Bill 170, and it's about primarily K-3 students, and their suspensions can't be more than 3 days each incident. You will see a little disclaimer there that says unless the offense involves physical harm or credible threat of physical harm to others, or the local school board or the division superintendent or his designee finds that aggravating circumstances exist as defined by the Department of Education. That's straight out of the bill, that wording. So there is a caveat. And we do not have the definition for aggravating circumstances yet. We will update everybody as soon as we do.
So his designee is in the bill?
It's the wording of the bill, yes.
Okay.
We can change that here, though.
Yes, sir.
Okay. On page, let me see what my next page is. Beginning on page 10, you're going to see the rules as written in policy JFC, which again will be presented to you later this evening, areas of offense and their definitions. The paragraph immediately before the rules that's been added, it comes directly from policy JFC, and it clarifies all areas where the rules apply. Other rule revisions include on page 11, you see the addition of the word altercation to the fighting rule name in order to address physical altercations. The committee felt that sometimes things are not necessarily a fight, but there can be a physical nature to something, so they wanted to be able to address that. The change also changed the placement of the rule alphabetically, since we do all of our rules alphabetically. Also, we did rewording of the cyberbullying rule to add substantial disruption to the school environment and to clarify that that is something that's considered. On page 12, we changed classroom or school disruption simply to disruption. The committee felt like when parents and children are using this, they're going to look for the word disruption. So if we're doing it alphabetically, let's just make it easier for them to find. We also added the horseplaying and insubordination as additional examples of disruptive behavior. We also, if you look at electronic devices, inappropriate use, that rule has changed placement alphabetically again because we took away the portable communication device. That's the way it was titled, and that's really not what, again, we thought people would look for when they're looking for that rule. On page 13, under inappropriate language or literature, we actually, it used to be just inappropriate language. We added the literature and the written portion into the definition. On page 14, we added a new rule, sexual activity, to define inappropriate behavior that does not fall under our current sexual harassment rule. The committee felt that the sexual harassment rule does very narrowly define what it applies to, and therefore we needed to be able to cover additional types of situations. We also changed stealing rule name to theft. That's more accurate legally. Those are the changes on page 14. On page 15, under tobacco, we added additional examples of prohibited items. And under trespassing, we added wording to include helping someone gain entrance to the building in an unauthorized manner. Finally, the rest for the pages between there and about page 39, there are really no changes other than the policy changes that will be discussed later in the agenda. At the back of the book for the directory information, we did identify Ms. Ownby as the vice chair. We also identified Ms. Barnes as the CFO, and we've added the James Blair information. You'll notice there's no telephone number yet. This book will not be printed until we have a telephone number for James Blair. So those are the changes for Code of Conduct. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Bourgeois? Comments, Mrs. Young?
Way back, the only question I had was about the primary offense. Or let me see if I can find it. Or primary was under bullying. But it talks about the offense being the one that is the most, still getting there. Okay. The most important or severe infraction, I mean.
What page are you on?
I'm on page number 8, but it says primary offense. So the most important or severe infraction, is that during the first time it happens, or I mean, are there other events working up to it, or?
So in any incident, there may be through 2 or 3 or even more rule violations. So if we have one student who cuts class and he's disrespectful to a staff member in the hallway, and as they're talking to him, he's found to be in possession of tobacco, he's got 3 different rule offenses. They have to decide what the primary or most serious one is.
Isn't this under bullying?
No, that's a definition. You're looking on page
That's the
8 under
crisis,
definitions.
okay.
Those are just all of our general definitions.
Okay, thank you. That was where I was confused. Okay. Yeah, that's true. You can't pile on.
Omby?
Does-
Oh, sorry.
Sometimes don't you ever pile on if a student is being awful?
We will document that, but we have to identify for state reporting reasons the primary offense.
Okay. Okay, now I understand. Thank you.
All students sign this document.
It is sent home with the acknowledgement form included. Yes, sir.
We're confident then 5 and 6-year-olds will fully understand what's spelled out in there.
About 15,
Or-
16,
or is that-
17-year-olds.
We're confident that
waived
parents are
in the
taking the
parents-
time to go through this with them and presenting the information at the appropriate developmental level.
Okay?
Wow, that's
Practice that. Ms. Omby?
I just have a comment. I wanted to thank you and applaud the division for taking the time to define and explain bullying and cyberbullying, and I think the table included in the document will be useful for families and students, so thank you.
Parents on the committee really worked on that table. They were the primary
I think it's great.
source. Yes, ma'am.
Just one comment. I agree, like, thank you so much for adding this. When you look at page 7, the how can I tell if it's bullying?
Yes, ma'am.
And you look under the conflict, rude/mean actions and bullying, the conflict talks about, it's in the third person, it's explaining what a conflict is. And then the rude and mean actions is saying the student is doing this rude or mean action. And then under bullying, it's flip-flopped, and it's instead what is happening to the student. So it's just a consistency in the wording. Do you want it to be worded all in terms of what the bullying behavior, what the bullying, do you see what I'm?
Yes, and we
versus
did
the
talk about
cause and
that
effect?
and tried to clean it up some. I
Okay.
certainly can try to get some additional input on that. With the conflict piece, we actually really struggled because conflict can be good. And we didn't want to define it as always negative, because, we can have discussions where we may be having a disagreement, but if we're doing it in an appropriate manner, we can learn from that in a positive way. So the conflict one actually had a lot of conversation about how to word it.
I think it was really more the going from the rude to mean actions to the bullying.
Okay.
That the rude and mean actions is the student is doing something, continuous verbal, nonverbal displays. And then when you go under bullying, it's more like who's affected by the bullying versus the behavior.
Victim
It's the
versus.
victim's perspective versus the perpetrator's perspective. So I don't know. It's just a consistency.
Oh, no,
No.
we did discuss it, and we can review that again.
Okay.
Comments? I too just want to commend you for the bullying page. It was really helpful, and it'll help me as a tool to talk to parents who sometimes are concerned about this topic. So I appreciate it from that perspective as well. Anything else? All right. With that, we will move on to information discussion items. 8.01, 21st Century and Career Ready Advisory Committee Annual Report. I guess that's Dr. Herron and Ms. Young and you and
Thank you,
Dr.
Madam
Carroll.
Chair. We're just bringing in the next 3 items, the board reports from the board committees. And I'm not sure if board members serving on those committees wish to make a comment or not.
I think the only comment that Mr. Mr. Ockenbaugh spent a lot of time and the committee going over each. Sorry, there was a lot of time spent on going over this, and I think the upshot is that there's quite a bit being done in the district as far as CTE, and more is recommended, a lot more. So, especially in pertaining to program studies and things like that.
Any comments or questions for the, no? Okay. That moves us to 8.02 Student Advisory Committee Annual Report, and that's Dr. Herron and Ms. Bourgeois and Mrs. Taylor and Mrs. Young. Would you like to speak to it?
Sure. I'll go more in depth later in my comments about our most recent meeting, but we had 3 meetings over the course of the school year. We talked about a number of topics. We talked about redistricting, school food, which I talked about at a previous meeting, school safety and security, and most recently, college and career preparation. So we're going to continue that next year. Very excited to see what topics our students will have for us.
Any other comments or questions on that? Okay. All right, the next up is 8.03 Special Education Advisory Committee Annual Report, and I believe we have a presentation for that. Ms. Zombi, do you want to introduce that? Or?
The chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee, Ms. Julie Cullifer, is here along with several SEAC members. So we're eager to hear your comments and report.
Good evening. Dr. Herron, Madam Chair, and members of the board. It has been my honor to serve as chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the 2017-2018 school year. I'm here tonight to provide a brief summary of our annual report and discuss the CX agenda for the next school year. However, before I begin, I would like to thank the members of the SEAC that have attended tonight and recognize them. Please stand as I call your name. Diana Anderson, Adrian Carter, Beth Haw, Christina Jones, Kara Newman, Christina Steifel, Christy Wagner. Thank you very much. At this meeting last year, I explained that the SEAC was in a rebuilding phase and our focus had been to bring visibility to the committee. I'm happy to report we witnessed the fruits of this effort in September when the SEAC, for the first time in several years, had multiple applications submitted for membership, which resulted in 4 new members being appointed by the board. I also stated that we plan to review the SEAC bylaws and work toward making SEAC a fully functioning committee per the Virginia Department of Education guidelines. I am pleased to report that SEAC did in fact work toward these aims. As we reviewed our bylaws, drafted a standard operating procedure with respect to the membership process, and increased SEAC visibility and collaboration with the members of the school board and the division. This year, SEAC took a more active role in the division's budget process. As committee members provided citizen comments with regard to the effects funding is having on our special education students, and committee members reached out to local funding partners to advocate support of the division's proposed budget. The SEAC has worked this year to demonstrate our willingness to advocate on behalf of the school board and the division where appropriate, and we are committed to continuing to do so in the future. Last year, the SEAC believed the bylaws, as understood at that time, were not sufficiently adequate to support the needs of the committee. We spent much of the fall examining our bylaws, locating additional governing documents, and reviewing them to ensure SEAC compliance. While this process was somewhat tedious and at times did not seem to end, we believed a more explicit set of bylaws would help aid SEAC in its ability to remain a focused and functioning body during times of high member turnover and leadership transition. The most significant change to the SEAC bylaws being presented for your consideration, unrelated to the various governing documents, is a twofold request related to leadership terms and elections. The SEAC would like for the term of the office for leadership to be changed from its current term, which is January through December, to its proposed term of July through June. Along with the change in term, the SEAC has proposed moving elections from January to May. These changes, while seemingly insignificant, will allow for SEAC leadership to serve an entire school year and give new members more experience on the committee before being asked to serve in a leadership position. Ultimately, we believe these changes will help provide continuity to the SEAC and will allow for the SEAC to focus on a more substantial work product to be presented to the board annually. Every year, the SEAC respectfully submits recommendations to the board for consideration. This year, the SEAC has 4 recommendations, which I will briefly discuss. Our first recommendation I've already addressed, but the SEAC would like for the board to consider and adopt the proposed changes to the SEAC bylaws and the SOP that was submitted along with our report. For our second recommendation, the SEAC would like to encourage the school board and division to ensure special education representation, whether it be parents, students, or staff, on any district or school-created focus groups, strategy planning sessions, process action teams, and program implementation when possible and appropriate. We believe a more increased and intentional outreach to this population and the staff that serve them, no matter how small the program or event, will provide unique views and experiences which will result in the increased success of special education students in the school community. Our third recommendation is in regards to the division website. The SEAC would like the division website to be updated to be more accessible to individuals with disabilities. Small changes will make a big impact on accessibility. Examples include utilizing alt tags to briefly describe pictures and adding periods in between abbreviations for visually impaired individuals and those using screen readers, adding captions to videos for the hearing impaired, and keeping text simple and segmented through shorter paragraphs, the use of bulleted points, as well as the increased use of icons for those with learning disabilities. Lastly, the SEAC was greatly encouraged by the division's move to create a behavior specialist position in the 2018-2019 budget. This is a recommendation the SEAC has been passionate about for several years and believes that it will make a significant impact for students with behavioral needs. As the division looks to hire a professional for this position, the SEAC would like to respectfully suggest that this position be filled by a board-certified behavior analyst, also known as a BCBA. BCBAs are licensed by the Virginia Board of Medicine and are considered experts in their field of behavior modification. They are required to hold a master's degree, and they have completed a minimum of 750 to 1,000 hours of fieldwork in an intensive practicum, or 1,500 independently supervised fieldwork hours. The level of experience and expertise an individual with a BCBA credential carries is unparalleled in the field of behavior management. Looking ahead to next year, SEAC is excited to announce that we will be focusing on the issue of inclusion and what that looks like across our division. Inclusion can be many things and have many components, as it is both a practice and a philosophy. Inclusion starts at the top, with administrators and teachers who are dedicated to the idea that all children are a valuable asset to the school community. Merely placing a child in a room with their peers does not mean that they are an active participant in their environment. Access does not equal inclusion. The only way to provide true inclusion is to make a child feel part of the school classroom community. We are confident, innovative, and inclusive practices are already occurring throughout our division. The SEAC intends to identify what practices, programs, and/or individuals are already being successful within the current framework of our division and examine if these great ideas can be replicated in other schools throughout the division. As I come to a close, I'd like to thank the WJCC School Board and Division for their commitment to the education and well-being of all students, particularly those with special needs. I would also like to thank Dr. Herron, Ms. Cook, Ms. Omby, Dr. Barreau, and Ms. Bourgeois for their willingness to meet with SEAC leadership and their continued support of the Special Education Advisory Committee. I believe this year we have made a substantial progress toward becoming a fully functioning SEAC that is ready to serve the board and aid in matters related to our special education students. I look forward to SEAC's continued relationship with the division and helping to make a meaningful impact on the special education population. Thank you.
Ms. Cullifer, any questions, comments?
One of the things you brought up, which is I think is very interesting, is changing the terms of office for the school year, and to me that makes a lot of sense for us too, where we
Caught me off guard there.
I'm sorry, but it just be for us as school board members also, because I find it discouraging. You get really involved in the process of what is happening on our committees, and then January 1st, you may not be doing that anymore. And to me, there's a lack of sense of completion sometimes. So.
Kelly?
Sure. Looking at the goals on page 6, I know it wasn't intended to do this, but the second goal where it says compile a list of individuals that are making a positive impact on special education students, it has a bad connotation, just as I read it. You know, you're compiling a list of, so if you're not on the list, you're not making a positive.
But we're looking for those
I know what you've
individuals who are going above and beyond.
Right, and I guess maybe more clarification is to share their ideas versus, because you kind of end with a period there versus what you're going to do with that data, just to, say we're going to compile.
Well, at this time, we're not actually sure what will happen with that data, because we aren't sure whether or not we will get into it and realize that there's so much data that takes up the entire year, or whether or not. So there was discussion about whether this will be a multi-year type of engagement process for us, that, next year could just purely be data collection for us. And then the year off, it could be, whether or not we're looking at the impact it has over the,
Yeah.
being disseminated throughout the community. But I
Saying,
understand your point is taken.
list of individuals just kind of struck me as a bad, baseline best practices, something along.
Yeah, data-driven.
Yeah.
What data justifies, yeah.
Yeah.
To that point, I think really when I read that, the sense that I got was just trying to identify the pockets of excellence that we know exist. And so being able to identify those pockets that we have, and then to be able to share that information so that it can be replicated across the division. That was how I read it.
So if you don't make the list, I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
That's kind of the connotation,
Well, I mean,
that's
the
not what
list-
the intention was,
yeah,
but
No,
that's
no,
kind
I know
of.
I know exactly what you're,
Yeah.
I know, that's what
Maybe that addition to that is, but identifying successful programs that may be replicated might be added to that. I mean, which is basically what Mr. Kelly is saying, but I don't know about compiling a list. I think that's iffy.
But I understand the best intention that was intended there, so I'm good.
And I'm presuming that process then would turn potentially into a recommendation in a future year, correct? Is that, okay,
Yes.
right, get it. Excellent.
We first have to determine who's doing what in the schools.
I just wanted to speak to the standard operating procedure. One of the things that I know the SEAC worked on this year was to ensure continuity for future leaders. And so in looking at, and I'm not looking at the SOP right now, let me pull it up. I think with diversity, one of the things that we were able to create this year was a process where SEAC leadership met with board leadership and central office staff, and were able to articulate, what your desire was. And while that is kind of, that thought is included in number 3 on diversity, that roadmap isn't there. And I know you can adjust this next year, but because that was such a great process for sharing information and for influencing the makeup of SEAC, I just don't want that to get lost when there's change. So that would be my only, if we could make just so that future leaders have a real clear.
We can make that change. I mean,
Yeah.
the standard operating procedure is not, in my opinion, it's a living document. Like, as we grow and as we start actually doing work, producing a work product, we're going to experience, and then we'll be able to create kind of procedures for how things go. I was hesitant to create that roadmap, because we have, we can't tell you all to do anything. We have to request. And so that's, but we can certainly include that in an updated SOP if that's what the board wishes.
I guess in the end, it's if that's what SEAC wants, but that was a process that worked and a process that wasn't there in the past. And
that was a phenomenal process, because it
Right.
really is important to us that are on the committee currently, that there is a diversity on several levels represented, because every person's experience, every parent's experience is different.
So I wanted to thank everyone who came tonight to share this report for us. Thank you, Ms. Culler, for
you.
presenting it, but,
Don't go away.
Yeah, don't go away yet, sorry. But everyone who's here to support the committee. Just in terms of process and bylaws, so that then would go back to, because there's policy implications, so the bylaws would go back through policy before it came to us, is that right? So can we do that? Can we do that? Yeah, can we put that on the agenda? And then aligned with that, this would involve our annual review of our SOP, but also the bylaws and also our policy, but to Mrs. Young's point, our terms are a year starting in January because that aligns with the school board terms. But committee terms, might that be different to align with the committee work? So at least maybe just think about that, per Mrs. Young's idea. I mean, it could be that we have 2 cycles depending on the nature of the committee. It's certainly worth considering. And then the SOP, though, that doesn't necessarily have to go through policy. That's yours. So that's the living, and I just want to applaud your efforts to provide continuity across. That kind of succession planning is critical to the future of a solid committee. So I really want to applaud your efforts to do that and to build on that SOP year after year, so that when people come in behind those people who are here tonight, they can grab that and use that as a guiding document to continue and further the work. So I just want to applaud that and thank you for building that really foundational piece. It's critical to the future. So I appreciate your forward thinking on that. And I also want to thank you for your advocacy on behalf of financial support for the division. It was critically important, and James City County let us know that, if they had been put in a position to have to cut our budget, we could have been looking at a $400,000 deficit. And so because of your efforts, you were instrumental in helping us not have to make those hard decisions and to be able to further the goals that Dr. Herron put forth in her budget. And so thank you very much for that.
Our pleasure.
So anyway, thank you. I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
So anyway, all right. Okay, that brings us to 8.04, construction update on the Lafayette High School Auxiliary Gymnasium project. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're going to give a brief update on the Lafayette High School gym project, and Mr. Snipes is here to introduce our speaker this evening.
Good evening again, School Board Chair, School Board members, Dr. Herron. In July of 2016, the board awarded the architectural design of the Lafayette School Auxiliary Gym project to Hargrove, Rockwell, and Associates, better known as HBA. And in 2017, Vertexco was awarded the construction contract for the Lafayette Auxiliary Gym. By our standard operating procedure for architectural design services, the representative is supposed to come back and give you a presentation, and he is here to do so tonight. It's Mr. Jack Hastings from HBA, and so he has a PowerPoint for you. Jack?
Members of the board, Dr. Herron, it's good to be with all of you tonight. I just want to give you a brief update on construction update in terms of where we are. And before we move forward, I just wanted to convey to you, roughly less than a year ago, all of these activities noted here were completed, and a construction contract in July of last year was awarded to Vertexco. And then just from an orientation standpoint, the addition is at the top of the drawing. The tennis courts are to the right, and we have a extended canopy that connects the high school to the new gymnasium, which is to the lower left of the gym. And this basically just shows a larger image. So from a current construction standpoint, this was taken roughly about a week ago, and what I do like about it is it shows the natural light that's coming in on the upper portion of the gym. Currently, the gym floor is in the process of being refinished. There's 6 basketball goals, volleyball court, batting, and a golf cage that's suspended from the overhead, and then we have supporting spaces on either side of the gym. The wood floor is a resilient floor, and the idea behind the gym is to replicate exactly what's at Lafayette High School. So if you're an athlete and you're practicing in this gym, the idea is to replicate exactly what you have in the main gym in the school. So from a schedule standpoint, we're approximately 90% complete. The image on the right shows the connecting corridor from the school to the addition, which is on the left of the image. The items that I've listed are the items that need to be completed. We have a term that we use, substantial completion, and that's quickly approaching. So we're approaching the finish line rapidly. So within roughly 30 days, the building will be substantially complete. with final completion in approximately 60 days from now. And as we get to any project towards the end, it's really important that acknowledgement is given to some very critical people. We mentioned construction services, and that's for Texaco Corporation, and that we're really lucky. We have a gentleman who has a lot of experience, Ben Burkett. Ben is your superintendent on this job, and he's done a really good job organizing a lot of people. You have Construction Services, which is a company you all probably know already, MBP. There's a gentleman named Mr. Tom Gill. And on any project, of course, you always have the client. And in this case, the client is led by Marcellus Snipes and Jim Falzone. And they're very important because they provide prompt decision-making, which makes everybody's job from the design team to the contractor really good, because we get prompt decision-making from both of these gentlemen. So, so that's the update on the construction update and the activities that's going to occur between now and occupancy. Any questions?
Questions?
Looks good, very excited.
Clarifying question. So when you said when students use the new auxiliary gym, it should reflect or look like the existing gym? Can you expand on that?
Well, it's and that may not have been incredibly clear, but the idea is there's a primary court, basketball court within the existing gym. So things like even the scoreboard locations, the setup of the gym is exactly like the existing gym is. The configuration of the overall room, though, of course, is significantly different, as is, in my opinion.
Better.
As in my
way
opinion,
better.
the difference is significant.
It's significant. Okay.
Yeah.
Lane's taller.
Because the original gym is really tiny and small and inadequate. The auxiliary gym. It's true. It's true.
Is it possible to go back to your map?
Of
Yeah,
course.
just one more back. Okay, and then this is slightly off topic, but
Okay.
for the previous discussion that we had about CDR, where is the
Playground.
The playground is where?
Playground is to your left. You see where this, it says new, I'm going to have to read sideways, new covered walkway, right at those letters?
Yes.
That area to the left is the green button? Oh, there it is, okay. It's this area.
Okay, so the students, the other playground is way down, is there, right?
Well, this is in between the 900 building
Right, so the
and the
900.
main building.
So
Not-
I just want everyone to understand I want everyone to understand my safety concerns, et cetera, with a second playground in that location. And in regard to the lease, I'm a little concerned that we have a second playground in that location.
Say, you're concerned about this playground here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm concerned. I really want to know, is it critically necessary for us to maintain that playground there, knowing that the students are going to have to, the little kids that are not our students, are going to have to be either, they're going to have to be moved from way over there, and then either go into the school if it's rainy or not, or I just have concerns. And I really want, I would ideally want for someone to really convince me that it is critically necessary to keep that playground.
So again, to expand on Mrs. Hummel's comments, because we had an opportunity to tour during construction when they had moved that playground, and so it was our understanding at the time that that playground was going to be expanded. So it hasn't been put back to where it was, and is the area now larger than it was before construction?
I was about to say.
Yeah.
In the microphone.
So, sorry. All the components within the original play area, it actually went adjacent to the existing building in that area. So the connecting walkway kind of interrupted the layout. of the play area. So basically what we're doing is we've relocated the components, we've stored them, and they're going to be reinstalled in a reconfigured fenced-in area.
And
But
that
they've not
is-
been
yeah.
installed yet.
Yeah, they haven't been installed
No,
yet?
no, that's correct.
And is there a cost to installing them?
Well, all of that work was included in the construction contract for the addition.
But if we don't do it,
We save money.
do we save money?
You would.
Thank you.
Or
Well, let me back up. If you decide not to use it, then you would have to do some removal. So the removal cost versus the relocation cost, they could balance out, but you would definitely need to do some restoration work to the site if you decided not to do that.
At this point, that's not a board decision, correct? That's an administrative decision? Is that correct?
All of the changes are included in what the board was approved for the project.
Right. Okay.
Because things were coming out to make the walkway, and they just had to be relocated within the same environment. So all of that was included, my understanding, in the original project. So it would be a change in the scope of the work and the nature of the work, potentially. And it
We're
may
just
affect the
discussing, it could be a
timeline
deduct.
as well.
It could be an ad deduct, or like you said, it would break even.
It could
be
be
a
budget, it
deduct.
could be budget neutral.
Yes.
It could be budget neutral, but
But I guess back to Mrs. Hummel's point, is it really truly necessary, given the
That-
security concerns?
I think.
I think
and
it's a
we need-
question for
We need to
CDR.
have we need
Yeah.
to have a discussion with Lisa Thomas
Yes.
and CDR and Ms. Quigley in regards to their needs. I mean, we are taking part of the space away
And
that
the
we're
principal.
using.
But we will leave
And
it
the
to
principal,
the
right.
administration to
Yeah.
handle that.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right. Anything else on this item? Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us to policies. We have, the policy committee and staff have been very busy, so for which we are grateful. So 9.01, revise and recode policy CBD, evaluation of the superintendent, to policy CBG, evaluation of the superintendent. Who would like to take this one? This is ours, right? Is that, okay. So,
Let Lisa.
Ms. Ownby, because Ms. Hummel
Because-
said, because Ms. Hummel said.
Yeah. Could you do this?
Okay. It's, Mrs. Hummel, you might have to help me.
I accidentally got out of board.
It's in line with VSBA.
Any questions?
There's clarifying language that's been added. Folks want to look at it line by line, and if there are questions, I'll field
Yeah.
questions.
Any questions about 9.01?
Sorry, I'm getting back into courthouse.
I think it's,
Mr.
Mr. Kelly.
Sure, line. Madam Chairs, line 13, that school board evaluates the superintendent annually. It doesn't flow well from the first sentence to the second sentence. Annually, the superintendent provides the school board evaluates the superintendent annually. I just wordsmithing.
What line?
13. I just don't like, it doesn't flow.
And Ms.
Oh,
Sears, maybe
stop.
you could, I'm pretty sure it's just, that we took the language pretty much from VSBA. Yeah, so you're wordsmithing their language, but
I don't care. I
I
wordsmith their
have no
language.
druthers.
I don't.
Okay, so you just want annually to be the first word of that sentence, is that correct?
For both, the sentence on line 13?
Annually, the school board evaluates, is that correct?
Or just add it into the next sentence. The school board develops the instrument, yada, 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 and evaluates the superintendent annually. I don't know.
Okay.
And that's better.
Do you have that, Ms. Surza?
I do.
Okay, great. So we'll make that adjustment and bring it forward. Anything else? Okay, that brings us to 9.02, new policy CBD, superintendent's contract compensation and benefits. Anyone? Anyone? Anyone?
Again, it's in line with VSBA.
I think we can, again, I feel more comfortable fielding questions, if you have questions.
Are there any questions? All right. So that will move that one to consent next meeting. 9.03, revised policy DA, management of funds. Dr. Herron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Barnes will present changes to this policy this evening. Our Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, School Board Chair, Dr. Herron, and other school board members. This evening, we're bringing to you Policy DA, Management of Funds, just as part of our ongoing review process. And this policy was first adopted in 2006 and revised in 2010, and currently it simply states that the superintendent or designee shall be responsible for administering the division's budget in accordance with board policies and applicable state and federal regulations and laws. The only change that we're recommending in the actual policy is changing the phrase shall be responsible to is responsible for administering the budget. And then we've also updated the footnote to include the changes that were made in the Virginia State Code in 2008 to list the categories prescribed by the Board of Education, and that includes technology as a category. So the attorney, as well as the policy committee and senior leadership team, have all reviewed the changes and found them acceptable.
Any questions for Ms. Barnes?
Sure. So number 2, is there any limit on the number of transfers?
Actually, there's not.
So you could do it 10 times in 3 weeks and move $1 million?
Sir, you could.
So I'm just curious, should we provide? I don't know. It just seems kind of, when it comes to management of the money, that it's kind of our.
I don't even think that element is in the VSBA version, is that correct? Yeah, so I thought it was actually good that we had it at all, because the VSBA doesn't even suggest it.
Right. So they suggest that the superintendent can't transfer any money, but we give unlimited times for the superintendent to transfer $100,000.
Well, I think the superintendent can transfer. My assumption of the omission was that the superintendent could transfer the money without school board approval. So I take the opposite reading to that, unless the locality has allocated money by category. Is it category?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, our budget is allocated by category, and our policy currently reads that if we want to transfer from category to category, then we must come to you for approval.
Right. Are you satisfied, Mr. Kelly? I just would be, I'd be cautious about that limiting, because you don't know, I mean, we could have a natural disaster, you just don't know. Just don't know. Have you, Ms. Barnes, but just, this is tangentially related, have you had conversations with James City County about their experience in recently instituting their transparency effort towards the checkbook, if you will? Yeah.
I have not. It hasn't come up, but it's certainly doable if it's what the board chooses to.
I don't know that that's a board decision. I just was curious if there were just lessons learned, or.
We haven't discussed it, but I certainly will.
Yeah. All right.
Okay with. We are an independent board, and, I'm fine with going.
I guess I had a question, excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I had a question about our financial report that we have in our board docs. But that isn't line by line.
No, it's broken down by function
category.
and category.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought. But, in light of the fact that the Board of Supervisors has, as of April 1st, put online the checkbook online, because I think taxpayers are, I can't imagine many of us spending time looking at that, but I mean, for those people that are interested, I think that's a valid request to maybe take a look at it. And I realize I don't know if that's a function of the board or not, but I may be with the liaison committee or talking to your co-partner over at the Board of Supervisors or over at Mounts Bay.
Don't we publish a monthly accounting on our budget? You know, we see the budget, we see what's expended, how much is left. We're in every one of the categories.
Yes, sir.
Why do I guess I'm not understanding.
I guess
Why do we have to do something else?
Possibly taxpayers want to see to whom checks are made and the amounts to those vendors. That's really about the only thing that the lay person would be able to pull from it. Of course, there are account numbers, but if you're not familiar with our account structure, they're probably not going to help you very much.
Any other questions on this one? Okay. That brings us to revised policy DB, annual budget.
Yes, ma'am. Well, the next policy has also been included in our review process and is policy DB, annual budget. This was originally adopted in 1974 and was revised in 2006 and once again in 2015. And the policy describes the process of creating and purpose for the annual budget. The recommended changes in the policy are, first, that the budget is set up in the major classifications that have been established by the Virginia Board of Education. Second, there is a change in verbiage regarding the annual budget calendar, removing shall include a work session in the budget calendar to a more definitive includes at least one work session. The third change relates to the publishing of the approved budget on the division's website. This also changes verbiage from shall publish to a definitive publishes the approved budget and adds that it will be in line item form as opposed to a summary. And this also speaks to our goal of being more transparent. This also is our current practice, so we'll be adopting this or revising this will keep us in line with VSBA policy as well as reflect our current practice.
Barnes, any questions on this one? I just would like to comment that the code requires that we advertise the budget public hearing in the newspaper. And I think that's antiquated, and I think that since we review these policies ideally on a 5-year cycle, 5 years from now, who knows if there will be newspapers. So if anyone wants to contact someone from the General Assembly and suggest that they change the code, that would be great.
I'm on that.
Yeah, so anyway. All right, anything else before we move to the next one? Okay, the next is 9.05, revised policy DGC, school activities fund.
Thank you. The final finance policy that's being presented for your review is that for policy DGC, school activity funds. This was originally adopted in 1982 and revised in 1995 and once again in 2015. So this policy describes the intent as well as the governance or oversight of school activity funds. So the purpose of the funds is to cover student body expenses at the school level. The policy also currently states that each school shall keep an accurate record of all receipts and disbursements. To keep in line with VSBA's recommendations and our current practice, we've changed the phrase shall keep an accurate record to keeps an accurate record. This is also in alignment with best financial practices, and VSBA's recommendation was also to include a section that requires each principal be bonded. Currently, Williamsburg-James City County Public Schools utilizes this type of coverage through our liability insurance carrier, and it's at no additional cost. The other changes are that rather than just a suggestion of shall be, the policy is making annual audits, generation of monthly reconciliation reports, and filing of copies of both the superintendent's office. So we're requiring that. We currently already do each of these things, so this just aligns our policy once again with practice and with the VSBA recommended policy. And it's also been reviewed by the Attorney Policy Committee.
On here, it talks about probably having a duly qualified accountant or current accounting firm audit this. Who currently does it?
DHLG, the same company that does our CAFR
Okay.
and audits our financial statements.
What is the responsibility for each principal to monitor this?
Well, we have several responsibilities. However, they must sign off on every expenditure. First of all, they must authorize the expenditure, and then they must sign off of it and sign the check as well. And there are several signers actually on each.
Receipt of funds, how does that work?
Well, the receipt of funds will come from the teachers to the bookkeeper, of course, and then the principal should sign off on that and compare that with the bank reconciliation. And so the bank statement's reconciled each month. The principal should sign off on that. And then a copy of that will come to the superintendent's office.
I have a question about school activity funds, just to make sure I understand them. So for instance, if there's a field trip planned for the 5th grade, and the cost of the field trip is $10, the student comes in with $10, that goes in the student activity fee, and then the school writes a check to the location of the field trip, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm very happy that these funds are audited, and I read them, those audits every year, but it does reveal differences across the schools, whether it's elementary or middle or high. And I want to, I don't want to better understand, but I hope that someone is looking at that, because are those differences attributed to the different size of the school? You know, a Stonehouse is going to be a different than DJ because there's just more kids at Stonehouse. Or is there something else? Is it the nature of the population in the school?
It can be all of those factors. It can be the size of the school. It can be, especially elementary schools, there aren't as many programs. So of course you're not going to see the level that you would in the middle school and
Sure.
the high schools, and especially in the high schools.
Right. So if you look, the elementary school budgets are smaller, to your point, and the middle schools are a little bit bigger, and the high schools are pretty big. And I want to make sure, I'm concerned that the money in and out of those funds across any given level, whether it be high or middle or elementary, that every student, regardless of the school they attend, has the same educational opportunity, and they aren't restricted by the funds available as a result of the population or the wealth or lack thereof of the population at the school. So I just wanted to, kind of, since we're talking about that, I just wanted to.
One thing that I did notice was that there seemed to be a difference and there is an account line called donations. One school had a very, very small balance, and while the other two schools had larger, in looking at high schools. So that the schools can receive the donations. Usually there is a specific reason the donor has made the donation, and the principal is required to follow that donor's wishes, and we ask them to document this. Welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. On to 9.06, revised policy GCDA, conditions of employment. Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
Thank you, Madam
Dr.
Chair.
Yeah.
Mr. Baker is going to introduce this policy, a change one recently brought up, but coming back to you again, Mr. Baker.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Herron. As Dr. Herron said, we brought this policy for you last fall, and we are going to make one slight change, or recommend one slight change, actually just one digit. This has to do with the who pays for the background checks for employees. And so on line 71, we wanted to change it from the grade up through grade. Currently, we pay through up grade 7, and we want to make it up through grade 8. So we would pay for the background check for new hires, specifically for bus drivers. When the bus drivers got regraded this year through the analysis, they went from 7 to 8, and so they got bumped out of this. So.
Bus drivers, cafeteria workers, custodians.
Correct.
Okay.
They all say current. Okay. And so we want to continue to pay for their background checks.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Baker? Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Thank you. That brings us to 9.07, revise and rename policy IIBD, school libraries and media centers, I believe.
arts libraries and media centres. I think there's some minor changes to this policy in terms of language, and Patty Bowen is here to present it this evening.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Heron. Policy IIBD is presented for revision and renaming to be in alignment with VSBA as well as American Association of School Libraries. The recommended changes have been reviewed by the policy committee, the media specialist, and the division's attorney, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Bowen?
No questions for over there.
He was running out of power, and it wasn't plugged in, so.
Okay, if there are no questions for Ms. Bowen, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Much, Ms. Bowen.
Thank you for waiting all this time.
Thank you. Item 9.08, revised JGE due process safeguards. Dr. Heron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Bourgeois is joining us again to take the next two policies, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. As promised earlier, I'm here to discuss policy revisions, and these policy revisions are reflected in the Student Code of Conduct. The first policy is JGE, which is the due process safeguards. You can say that 3 times real fast if you like. All of the changes that have been made in this policy are to comply with the new state codes based on the House Bill 1600, which is found in the Code of Virginia 22.1-277.06. That bill limited the number of days that long-term suspension can be to less than 45 days. And then we already discussed Senate Bill 170, which can be found in Code of Virginia 22.1-277, which is the K-3 suspensions. We actually got input directly from the attorneys to make sure we were representing these changes correctly and identifying them correctly within our due process safeguards, so this has been provided from our attorneys. You will see once again on lines 24, 25, 38, 39, 56 to 57, it does say superintendent or superintendent's designee, Mr. Kelly. But it also describes the aggravating circumstances, which is yet to be defined.
Any questions for Ms. Bourgeois? Yes, Mr. Kelly.
So the only question I had is where it says appeal of long-term suspension in line item 156 and on. Should we add something in there that says in an appeal to the school board may reduce, uphold, or extend a suspension? So that people know that if you appeal to the school board, we may do something completely different than what was the original. So an appeal is not just, okay, so I've got 30 days, and so now I'm going to come out with 15. You might come out with 60.
Yeah.
So just to...
Word of caution.
fully informed, right?
Certainly do that.
That's just my humble...
Is that something that we can do and still include, or does that need to circle back to the attorneys?
I will circle back just to make sure there's not any unintended.
Okay. Do you have enough
potential.
time to do that between now?
Yes, they
Okay.
are very responsive.
Okay. So we'll still put this on consent agenda
Yeah.
with that. Anything else on that one? Okay, that brings us to the next one, Ms. Bourgeois, JFC areas of offense and their definitions.
Correct. Right by my red line one, I'm sorry. I have too many policies tonight. So JFC, it does include all of our rules. You will see here the red lines that you did not see in the Code of Conduct. The changes that you'll see, and we apologize that these aren't numbered. It's presented in the chart that's created for the Code of Conduct book, and there's no way for us to number the lines in the table. So we apologize that the rules are not numbered by line. But you will see that basically it's the changes we talked about. You can see in bullying and cyberbullying that we did take out some of the wording, the operation of the school building or school division, because we added the school environment there. That was recommended by our attorney. We've already discussed the other title changes. I don't think there's anything else different. Everything else was included. Oh, we did take out in threats the word bodily before harm, because we just wanted it to be harm. It could be either more than just bodily harm. And also under harassment, we took out the word hazing because hazing has its own rule. So it did not need to be included under harassment. So it was mainly additions, not many deletions.
Any questions for Ms. Bourgeois?
I do have one question. So, in the tobacco definition, and this is going to show my ignorance on vaping, is that inclusive enough? So it says, so nicotine vapor or any other products containing nicotine, is that inclusive of all vaping activity? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, we have any other products containing nicotine or alternative nicotine products, so that basically covers everything. What we've added here was really in support of the changes that we made to the adult policy earlier this year.
I know there's some kid out there who's like, well, it doesn't contain nicotine. It's not
Right,
a,
yeah. Well,
no,
it's
yeah.
not it's not a
Yeah.
nicotine product. It just makes a lot of
Vaping
water
cinnamon,
vapor.
yeah, or
Yeah,
whatever,
right.
yeah.
So- but I'm not hip enough to know, so,
Well, we have in there whether or not they contain nicotine.
okay.
We did say that very clearly. So
Uh,
that way, hopefully, whatever the term is, we're covered.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question. What is the difference between horse playing and roughhousing? Why did we select the word horse playing instead of roughhousing? What is horseplay?
Quite honestly, I think it's vernacular that students this age will understand horse playing before they might understand roughhousing. Roughhousing, you and I understand. No, I did not. No, ma'am, I specifically didn't.
Well, no, because I grew up with rough housing, not.
Correct.
not with horse playing.
It's now horse playing.
And they'll know what that means, right? Yeah,
They will know what horse
Okay.
playing is.
Not in Ireland.
Not in Ireland.
It's roughhousing in Ireland.
Roughhousing?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of
Rough
horseplay?
housing doesn't sound as old as crazy. Horse playing sounds really old.
Not roughhousing.
Not many kids play with horses.
No, not many at all.
All right. Anything else? We are, okay. Thank you, Ms. Bourgeois. I appreciate it. Thank you much. All right, you're not sticking around for the next one? Okay, so that brings us to 9.1, I'm sorry? 9.10 revised policy JHCF, student wellness. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Snipes and Ms. Haley is here to address questions and present this policy this evening. It's a coordinated effort.
It is a coordinated effort, and again, I wanted to give thanks to Ms. Bourgeois. She said she wasn't going to stay up here, but she was definitely involved in this. We are revising policy JHCF, which is student wellness. It was adopted in 2006, and it was last revised in 2008. It does align and conform with the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, and our attorney has reviewed it and supports the recommendation. Some of the things that are changing in this policy is that we are deleting lines 27 through 29, lines 38 through 41, and line 43 through 45, in addition to line 61 through line 65. Those changes are allowing us to add in some new information that the committee felt that was necessary. One of the things that this does, it provides a designee. The superintendent needs to select or a designee that is responsible for overseeing the implementation of the policy, developing procedures for evaluating the policy, and using indicators to measure success. They'll also measure and make available to the public every 3 years an assessment of this policy, an extent to which the schools are in compliance with the policy, and how the policy compares with the model wellness policy that has already been provided in another program. So I will step away for any questions and answers and leave it to the two experts that were instrumental in creating this, Jane Haley and Amy Lizette.
I just wanted to.
Before we do dive in, do you all have anything to add before we start asking questions?
We're available for any questions that you might
No,
have.
that's fine. I just wanted to let the rest of the board know that, although this is at the very end of our meeting and we're all tired, this policy is a pretty important policy, and it's one that Ms. Ownby and I had a lot of questions about, and we spent a lot of time in our policy committee talking about, in particular, what the impact of this would be for our schools, and in particular, the Smart Snacks in School Nutrition Standards, which is referenced on line 32. There's you can kind of look it up. It's a policy that, maybe you can talk about that for them, give them a little background on that, and then any of the changes that the schools might have to see in the future with this new policy.
The Smart Snacks in Schools came about as part of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. The Smart Snacks will affect any of the items that are for sale or that are distributed to the students, or any of the items that parents will send in for a class party or that type of thing that has had or happens in the school during the school day. It will not affect any of the activities for concessions. Anything that is held after the school day will not be affected at all by this policy. The Smart Snacks we did provide in the regulations. There is a chart that clearly defines and outlines anything that gives you a pretty good idea of what you can bring in that would still conform to it. You can also go online. There's a calculator that you can see how you can meet the calories and the nutrition guidelines to have items. We'll also be able to provide for parents that would still want to have a snack to bring in to provide a classroom party. Child Nutrition will have some items that they could purchase relatively inexpensive to, for their classroom if they would like to.
So Mrs. Cook is concerned that we're not going to do business with Hershey anymore. Because that was kind of a favorite line item of hers. So is that a consequence of?
Candy is an item that is not going to meet the Smart Snack regulation.
Or the ice cream or the?
Cupcakes? Ice cream, if it is ice cream that is of a nature, the ice cream that we sell in the cafeteria does meet the Smart Snack guidelines. There are certain types of ice cream you can buy that would meet it. I can't tell you that the Hershey ice cream that you would buy off the street would meet it, but there are certain types that would.
The cupcakes for the kids when they're, no, that doesn't meet it?
No.
Wow, okay.
No Hostess Twinkies?
Hostess Twinkies would not meet it either.
I don't think you can get those anymore.
Okay. I agree, I totally support.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
currently
that's now-
sell Hostess Twinkies, actually. And we do encourage for the fundraisers, there are a list on the SHIP website. There is a list of fundraisers that are non-food fundraisers, which are easily, items that can be sold that won't present a problem.
The reason I said that is many, many years ago, I was the one that packed the lunches, and I'm horrified to think of some of the things that were put in those bags.
I have
But
to.
we didn't know. We didn't.
No, I have to voice my objection to that. Partially because it sounds like it smacks of food police. I don't like it. I understand about Smart Snacks in school. I understand about how things are being regulated, but I still believe that parents have the right to send what they want to send for their children to eat for lunch.
Yeah, this policy would not affect anything that you send in your child's lunch is not affected by this policy.
But it does affect things like celebrations in school and things like that.
That is
and
correct.
then a segue onto that, what about teachers? I mean, in the teachers' lounges, are they going to still be allowed to have soda machines and candy machines? Because they're adults, and they should be able to have control over what they put in their mouth.
In the teachers' lounges, that is correct. Anything this only affects areas that are accessed by the students. In the teachers' lounges, that would not be affected because they're not accessible to the students.
can't support this policy at all. I can't. I think that's wrong.
Anything else? Somebody?
I guess just to Hummel's point, one of the things that we discussed at length was just making sure that we're able to educate all of our teachers and staff about, and parents about the changes, because they are pretty significant. Even like things that we talked about were, when the foreign language teachers have students bake desserts, that can't do that anymore. So just being able to, it will change how business is done. So if students are going to learn a recipe in a foreign language and then get to make it, bake it, and bring it in, there's now constraints on that activity, which is a fun activity.
But what right do we have to do that? I don't believe that we, as a school board, have the right to dictate this kind of overreaching policy to schools. And believe me, I understand the thinking behind it, but I think it's a wrong approach. We're now regulating the things that can come into a school for students. I have a major concern with this, and I do believe it's overreach by this policy to do that.
Just to be clear, this policy is derived from not locally, is that correct? It's just derived from the federal law? Yeah.
On the CDC recommended policy, which was the Alliance for a Healthier Generations Model Wellness Policy. And that is at a national level what is being recommended. Sorry, that is the policy, the model policy at a national level.
It's not a regulation.
I'm sorry?
It's not a regulation. It's not a regulation. It's a recommended policy, correct?
So the model wellness.
If schools don't follow that policy, are they in jeopardy?
So in terms of what is sold or served to students, meeting those Smart Snacks guidelines is a necessity for our nutrition program, for our child nutrition services, in order for them to receive the free and reduced lunch and breakfast program funding.
So there is, okay.
So there are, those are where the guidelines come from.
Okay, so if you don't follow those, you risk losing funding for free and reduced lunch?
Clarify?
Yeah, we have to have a wellness policy in order to continue with the child nutrition program and to receive the federal funds. What's contained in the policy is certainly within the purview of the individual school divisions. So there is, this particular policy was developed by our local wellness policy committee, which had a variety of individuals on it, from principals to teachers, community members, students, et cetera. The Smart Snacks has to be followed within the child nutrition department. We have to follow that. If it is included in the policy, then it has to be followed by the school. But, there is some area in here where certain things could be changed. This is just the particular policy that was brought forth by the policy committee. But we do have to have a wellness policy for the division, yes.
I think I can see both sides. Having 3 kids, that I just saw the gradual increase in the amount of sugar consumption that occurred in the kids' elementary schools. It was totally out of control with parties, 3 parties a week with celebrating every holiday, and it was treats for good behavior, candy right and left. So I totally see where this is coming from. I don't want us to go and swing the pendulum so far that, for example, the Latin Club couldn't have a, baklava or something. I think there's
Greek.
Greek club, or the Italian club couldn't have cannoli. I don't know wherever we're going with that, but I just don't want us to be so restrictive, and I don't know whether we could add some kind of exceptions for cultural activities, things like that. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that, or.
I concur with Ms. Hummel, and that was the discussion. Sorry, we're still beating this horse. But even for, like, some of the clubs, like, you know, the National Junior Honor Society and other clubs within the elementary schools, they will sell their lollipops to raise money or whatever. So it is very restrictive, and I think, I understand the birthday parties and the cupcakes, and carrots are better than cupcakes. But if the Latin club wants to learn a recipe in that language, what's the dead language? So the Italian club.
Don't tell the Italians that.
Latin.
And I
Oh,
take
Latin.
this, I do take it really seriously because we do, in our country, we do have an obesity epidemic in children. And it's getting worse, it's not getting better. So I'm going to support any policy that's going to help students eat healthier food so that they don't become part of that growing population. Because it's not just the kids, it's adults. It's a real problem in our country, and a lot of it has to do with the kind of food, the things that we eat, and how much we eat. So, no, I'm comfortable with that.
Anything else?
I'm not done. I understand about the obesity thing. I do. I understand about a lot of things, but I have true reservations about restricting everything so rigidly. And I would like, if the rest of the board, taking Ms. Hummel's suggestion is talking about a little bit of leeway in there. This is a wellness policy, and I understand that, and I understand the concerns, but I think it's rigid. I think it's extreme. I don't think it allows for, and so if all of these things change next week, will we be back here looking at this because we have a new Secretary of Education on the federal level? I think this is
Department.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this doesn't come through the DOE, right? It comes through the USDA. Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, that's even scarier. So I would like this revisited. I can't support it as written.
A point of clarification, this in no way restricts what any parent sends in their child's lunch or what any child brings for their lunch to eat. So the committee was not trying to restrict any family's right to make choices about what they're providing to their own child. What the committee was responding to was what was being served to students. So if you were sending your child to school, it was a matter of what was being served by a classroom teacher or another parent who might come in and bring cupcakes for the whole class, and you as a parent didn't even know that that was being served to your child. So it was trying to set those guidelines and extend them to what was being sold or served to students, not what a child brought in from their own family with their own family's backing and permission.
So you all won't be surprised to know that I think about this a
It's
lot.
not fixable.
That's flexible.
Yeah,
No,
and
it's
so
not.
I have several questions. So first, a comment. It's rare that we get a policy that comes before us where it's from two parts of our division. So we've got student services and operations represented. So I think that speaks to the depth and the importance of this policy, and I applaud that you all work together on this, and I appreciate that very much. I understand the sensitivity about being overly restrictive, and I think one of the things that Ms. Haley and Dr. Lazev have done really brilliantly in the last several years is really working towards positive methods to encourage change and not being the donut police, if you will. And so I do hope that philosophy continues in this new policy, and I applaud all of the work that you've done to that end, and really in partnership with the family and the community at large, rather than an overreach, because that type of change that needs to take place to prevent obesity in our children has to be in partnership with the community and families. And I think that we're a real leader in this effort. We have water bottle filling stations at all of our high schools, I believe, and in our middle schools, and that makes the healthy choice the easy choice, right? You're going to drink water instead of soda. Our farm-to-school offerings are increasing dramatically year over year. In the classroom, we're providing flexible seating and other healthy environmental additions. You're providing movement in the classroom on a regular basis and nutrition education linked to the SOL. So I think we're really a model. People all over the country and all over the state certainly are looking to what we're doing. So, and I think this policy reflects that. I think if the board wants to adjust it for educational opportunities, that's something that I think we can maybe send that back around rather than trying to put it back on the agenda next week, so, or next meeting, if that's okay. But I did have some things that I just wanted to comment that I think where we could do better, that I'm concerned with. And then this is the regulation area, and I know that's not I appreciate your including them, and I know it's not our jurisdiction, but I feel like I just want to comment on them. The first is recess. The General Assembly just recently allowed school divisions to count recess as instructional time, and I hope that the administration chooses to look at that and take advantage of it. Another area we've talked about is start times. I know you're looking at that now, Dr. Herron, but our high school start times currently now are unhealthy for teenagers, and I think we know that. We know no one's figured it out. There's no silver bullet. Nowhere around the country is it really working perfectly, but I think we need to continue to think about it. And then finally, our cafeteria offerings do concern me, particularly in selling caffeine. We used to not do that in our cafeterias, but recently we started to do that. The same is true for artificially sweetened sodas and other diet drinks. And I'm concerned that we are selling those items to subsidize the CNS budget, Child Nutrition Services budget. It's one thing for kids to bring those items to school because that's what their family supports at home. I would never want to restrict it, but I think it's another thing to sell it to students, and that concerns me. And I think particularly because those items are a la carte, I think it can set up, we talk about equity and disparities, and I think when you're walking around school with a Frappuccino in the morning, that's not on the breakfast menu. A smoothie is on the breakfast menu, so if everybody's walking around with smoothies, whether they bought that as breakfast or a la carte, there's not a visible difference, but a Frappuccino there is, and that just concerns me. And then also one more thing about bringing in cupcakes. As we learn about more and more student allergies, that becomes more and more of a danger. People aren't really allergic to carrots, right? So, or maybe some people are, but not as many as, are allergic or to gluten or whatever, so, or gluten intolerance. So, so why don't we just go ahead and pull this from the next agenda and circle it back, but I think we're doing a remarkable job, and I think we should continue on that trend rather than pulling back from it.
I'd also like to know what the smart snacks in school nutrition standards are and what that means and what the impacts of following that are.
Aren't they in the regs? Isn't that
They're in
table?
the
Yeah,
regs.
they're in the regs. They're in that table in the
There's
back
a
of
full
the.
table that outlines the regulations.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was one of my points. That was one of my points, is that when we should have a link to it or something so that people, it's really clear what that is.
But it's, okay.
And for educational purposes, the French snack and all that, the French class, I kind of hear where Mrs. Young is coming on this.
I mean, for me, the converse of this, for me, is you can do all of this during school. And that's basically what this policy is trying to do. What you're trying to do is teach lifelong habits, like the being able to fill the water bottles at school, which I think those are very proactive in teaching students positive management of weight and thirst but I really like this revisited because the problem that happens is we know that when kids leave home or they're no longer in the school environment, they go crazy because all of a sudden they do have access, and they're not all able to take that, what they've learned, and then apply it to their adult lives. And, I mean, that's the goal. And I assume that's the goal, is that we want children to become adults that are wise in what they put in their mouth. But to me, this is, I mean, the thing that happened with school lunches, where students were just dumping them because they were unappetizing, and they weren't meeting their nutritional needs either. And so I would appreciate very much if this could be taken back, and again, the link to Smart Snacks in School added, and maybe doing some rethinking about some educational applications of eating foods from other countries, or so that would be my take on it, but I think it's very restrictive. And I do appreciate all the hard work you've done. I don't want you to think that I'm just throwing you under the bus, because I know, looking at this, that this took an incredible amount of time, and I do appreciate that.
And we would just like to thank the committee members. We had representatives, teachers, parents, PTA, students, who met for a year to put together the recommendations and put forth their recommendations for the policy. So we'd like to publicly thank them for their efforts as well.
If you provided a list of those people, I missed it, so can you
We
do
can
that?
provide that.
That would be helpful to see, the broad representation. So, all right, anything else? Thank you. All right, so that brings us to action items. 10.01 personnel actions. Can I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the personnel actions as presented this evening.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Souza, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly. Ms. Ownby.
Aye.
Mrs. Taylor.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. That brings us to 10.02, WJCC Schools Foundation. Ms. Hummel, can I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the WJCC School Foundation's donation for innovative learning grants in the amount of $18,813.82.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Souza, will you call the roll?
Ms. Ownby.
Aye.
Mrs. Taylor.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye. All right, that passes. Thank you all for letting us do that tonight. That brings us to 11.01 board member comments. Ms. Taylor, do you have anything
Yes,
today?
I do. As referenced earlier, on May 16th, I took part in a student advisory committee meeting along with Dr. Herron and Ms. Young, and we talked about a number of topics related to post-secondary opportunities for our students, and this included discussion of advertisements of these opportunities, such as the annual College and Career Fair, Virginia Wizard, the FAFSA, as well as opportunities to better prepare for standardized tests like the SATs. Liz Parker, the coordinator for school counseling, was in attendance for those conversations that we had, and I'm looking forward to seeing what improvements can be made in raising awareness of these opportunities for our students on an ongoing basis. And also, as referenced earlier by Dr. Herron, on May 17th, I had the honor of attending the retirement and pin ceremony along with some of my colleagues here to celebrate the accomplishments for our longstanding employees with WJCC and to hear about all of their accomplishments and years of service. It was very inspiring. And we are in the home stretch of the school year. I'm looking forward to graduation on June 16th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. Mr. Kelly?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Young?
Okay. First of all, Dr. Beers and I had the opportunity of visiting New Horizons, and it was an amazing experience. Being able to walk through some of the labs, the dead cats I did not like, that were being dissected that day in the governor's school, but the fact that they have those opportunities is pretty awesome. And the fact that there was welding going on, they have an electrician school, and when we went to Woodside, we saw how some of those programs are going to be moved much closer to WJCC, so our students are going to have the opportunities. And Dr. Beer wants to take the electrician's course. We came out of that with that. But the thing that was so exciting was to see students who are actually welding, who are actually working in dental, being a dental assistant and pharmacy assistant, and those are opportunities for our students, which I think are amazing. The one takeaway that I did come away with that is the importance of using your school time valuably and making sure that you can do math and science, because that STEM application goes across the board, which goes on when we went to the apprentice school. Ms. Ownby and I attended the apprentice school on May 30th and had the opportunity, and I brought pamphlets for the whole board.
I'm good, thanks.
I knew that you would be. But you could pass this down to Dr. Heron. Let's see who's down there, Dr. Heron. Because, again, that STEM application became so important. And the other part of it was the opportunity for, like, if I was a student today that could not afford to go to college immediately, but being able to work and learn, and then at the end of 4 years being able to come out of that program with an associate's degree, and you can go on to other places to do that, to use that. You don't even have to stay at the shipyard, although that would be advisable, I think, after all of that training. But it was, it gave me the impression that our students need to know so much more. We need to find a way. And during the SAC meeting, one of the things that came out of that, somebody suggested developing an app for each of the high schools so that they would know about CTE opportunities, so that they would know about New Horizons and opportunities at the apprentice school, because not every student is planning on going to college, and not every student is going to get into college, but there are so many other opportunities out there if we can help them find them, and where they can really have a terrific life, and that would be my goal. The thing that I loved about the apprentice school, that is after 4 years, you can graduate from that program at earning $62,000 a year, which is for a 18 to 22-year-old kid, that is pretty amazing, because I know many teachers, even after 10 or 15 years, aren't making $62,000. So, and again, I appreciated going with Ms. Ownby and Dr. Beers and enjoy those opportunities. Did enjoy very much the retirement ceremony, and want to congratulate those people that are retiring, and wish them happy trails, and that they get to do all the things that they were talking about doing. And for those our very loyal associates who have been working for the school district for so many years, thank you for your service. A pen is our very small way of letting you know how much you're appreciated, but you are very appreciated. So,
Dr. Beers?
I don't really have anything to say, because, Mrs. Young and I did have just a wonderful 2.5 hours with the retiring executive director down there, Joe Johnson, who over the last 10, almost 15 years, has really transformed New Horizons. They have so many programs. The biggest thing that they have done is they have really fostered relationships with all the big companies and businesses around there, and they're pretty much at the point. If a student is accepted, comes into one of the programs, they're pretty much guaranteed a job with one of those companies when they get out, because that's part of the arrangement that they've been doing down there. The other thing I appreciated talking to Mr. Johnson was that they also are careful not to duplicate CTE offerings that are offered within school districts, and so it's a place to go if you're not able to get training in a particular area because it's not offered in your district. But then But it's also, they're not going to compete with programs that they don't offer. But it was, and that Woodside, I remember what that old place looked like. They transformed it. It's a beautiful building now, and it's going to be so close for Williamsburg, James City County students. The other thing that we talked about was the possibility, and I guess it's happened in the past, but especially for guidance counselors who may not be familiar with a variety of offerings down there, is try to figure out a way to set up a time when they can go down and really get a sense of what's going on. And I don't know who the executive director is yet. Obviously, it's somebody's already been hired because Joe has retired now, and that's probably why he had such a big grin on his face as he was walking around. But what was really, and Mrs. Young, mentioned it, is the students there were so engaged. They were so positive. And the other thing was 98% of the students that were in a particular program, they had passed their licensing or certification exams, and it was, you could really tell. And I said to one of them, who was a dental assistant, in all likelihood, one of you are going to pop. I'm going to walk in one day, and you're going to be there. So it was very worthwhile.
And Dr. Beers, I do hope that you'll accept our congratulations and gratitude for your service on the WHRO board. We really appreciate your doing that and know that you're going to do an exceptional job. So it's
Dr. Beers, take one and pass them down.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Hummel?
I'm going to leave the discussion about our visit to Hornsby to Ms. Cook so she has something to talk about. And then I want to thank the Williamsburg Community Foundation that gave away last Sunday, just 2 or 3 days ago, $74,000 in scholarships for seniors in the WJCC schools. And it's quite an amazing statement of support from our community that they would, that these individuals would give that much money in support of our students that are heading on to college, and every little bit helps. And that was a lot of cash to hand over on Sunday. And then also to thank WJCC Schools Foundation for yet another wonderful donation of $18,813 for innovative learning grants. So I just wanted to thank, we get confused with all these foundations, but they both are doing wonderful things for our students and teachers. Thanks.
Yes, I was invited to speak to the Williamsburg Community Leadership Service alumni, which is a wonderful group of retirees who were very interested in K-12 education and wanted to learn more about our division. I was impressed to learn that so many were currently volunteering in our schools, and I encourage those who are not volunteering in our schools to come into our schools and roll up their sleeves and work with some of our students. I also had an opportunity to be interviewed by 3 William & Mary students who, 2 were researching redistricting and what that process was like. And another graduate student from the School of Ed was wanting to learn more about special education. Wanted to give a shout out to Lafayette High School and their band performance last week. I guess with our energy efficient measures, we turned the AC off in the evening. So it was so hot at Lafayette, the band director allowed the students to take their tuxedo jackets off. Maybe we could revisit why it was so hot. But then wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Pfeiffer, who's one of our first year teachers at Hornsby Middle School, and he received one of the school's foundation grants at the beginning of the year. And so he got to demonstrate his project was really cool, project-based learning. So he created an escape room for his civics class. Originally, the idea was to use it as SOL preparation, but with all the snow days,
the SOLs happened, and so now the students are doing it as just kind of as fun review. When I was there, one of the teams was the fastest to get out of the room in 14 minutes, so 30 minutes was the cap. But it was really exciting to see that with his $1,500 budget, he kept it at, he went $6 over. So he spent $1,506 to create this, but he was able to do that because of the incredible partnership with the Williamsburg Escape Room. So they offered all of their like planning and ingenuity and like how do you make a cool room services for free. And then he incorporated the art department at Hornsby Middle School to create the backdrops and the canvases. And so it really truly was a partnership. And then he had student leaders guiding the students through the process. So just wanted to give a shout out to him. He was a very excited first year teacher. It was a really cool project-based learning opportunity for our students.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great.
I just wanted to let everyone know that, to thank Dr. Ellison at Hornsby Middle School, Ms. Hummel and Council Members Zhang and Supervisor Larson and I toured last week and had a nice visit there. It's always nice to bring our funding partners into schools and let them see all the wonderful work we're doing. Also wanted to echo what several people here said about the retirement and pinning ceremony. It's always a pleasure to be in the presence of such amazing talent and dedication. I also wanted to let you know that, was it 2 weeks ago that the school liaison committee met? Was that 2 weeks ago? And the primary topic of that conversation was school security and safety. And we talked about the school resource officer program. Several school resource officers were there, or actually one was there, but several representatives from the City of Williamsburg Police Department and the James City County Police Department. We talked about physical security of the buildings, and then the SRO program, and a little bit about social emotional safety of children as well, and as a preventive measure. I just want to be clear to the community that the school division is really doing a fine job about this. We don't talk about it often for obvious reasons because we don't want to over-communicate what we're doing in terms of safety and security. So just because we're not talking about it doesn't mean it's not top of mind. And I appreciate taking the time to communicate with our localities on that topic, and I think they were actually impressed with what we had to say. And then also just want to echo, Ms. Hummel often talks about how her favorite part of the meeting is the board recognitions. And I just, as I reflect on a year's worth of those as we go towards graduation, I think we really have an embarrassment of riches. Sometimes I think we take for granted what an amazing school division we are, whether it's the Wells Fargo Cup in athletics or drama groups winning state awards, athletic state level awards, Principal of the Year, Blue Ribbon School, PTA School of Excellence. I mean, there is just no shortage of excellence and nationally recognized awards and statewide awards that we win on a regular basis. And I think because it's so regular for us, sometimes we take it for granted. So I just wanted to reflect on that for a minute. Anything else before we move on? Okay, the next item on the agenda is upcoming events. On the 7th of June, we have the GED ISEAP completion ceremony at 6 p.m. at Jamestown High School. And then on the 16th, all day at Kaplan Arena at William & Mary, we have Warhill High School graduation at 9, Jamestown High School graduation at 1, and Lafayette High School graduation ceremony at 5. I think also tomorrow there's Warhill Early College. Is that right? That's tomorrow.
High school?
And is there anything, I feel like I'm missing something else.
The exceptional games.
Oh, the exceptional games are at Jamestown at 10 o'clock on Thursday, and what?
Butterfly Garden.
Yeah. So there's a lot. Clara Bird Baker Butterfly Garden, yeah. So, and then our upcoming meetings are on the 19th of June, we have a closed session at Building F on Mounts Bay Road at 5:30, followed by a regular meeting at 6:30 in Building F in that boardroom. And then on July 10th, we have our only meeting in July here at Central Office at 6 p.m., starting with a closed session, followed at 6:30 with a work session and action items. Yes, Sandy?
June 7th, there's the GESA
Mhm.
completion ceremony.
Yeah. I just butchered it, so thank you for saying it again. Yeah. Okay, and then setting agendas, items for the next regular meeting, we have the CDR lease, the VHSL membership, the federal program grants, and then the code of conduct, in addition to all the policies that move on to consent, with the exception of the one that we pulled, the student wellness. And then also, we're going to be, for action, looking at Dr. Herron's contract, strategic planning goals. We'll also have the VSBA delegate as a item to talk about for July. And I think that's it. And CDR may or may not be on there for action, depending on what staff's able to do. Is that correct? All right. And with that, meeting adjourns.